Yeah, and there's a pretty famous book out there that says, "Ask and you shall receive; knock and it'll be open unto you." And that's it, John. That we just have to ask enough people for a deal, and you're going to get a deal.
Yep.
Ask enough people for a listing, ask enough people for a sale. And if you're a real estate agent today, um, listen, hats off to social media and video and content and all of that. But listen, nothing beats old fashioned prospecting.
Yeah.
Nothing. So,
Yeah. I think it's interesting the way you phrased it, because someone I'm a big fan of is Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And he always talks about putting yourself out of business. The example he gives all the time is if you're a mechanic, you should be showing everyone how you repair your car, how you do oil changes, how you do this, what you look for, how to service your car, blah, blah, blah. Because the bottom line is you don't know it yourself. You're going to go to the guy who's shown you everything that you trust and eventually go and get their business the day you need it. Is there going to be the person that never comes knocking on your door to give you money? Of course not. But guarantee the person that does is going to refer you to somebody else that does need that. And It was just really interesting to hear you say that before the world of, I won't say internet, but we'll call it social media, because he talks about, doing it a lot in today's age, and you did it at a time, 10, 15 years before that, let's say. So it was really interesting to hear you do the same thing and how you had so much success.
and so what's crazy though? Some of these trends have been around for years. I mean, even if you look at the social media and and I do it all the time. I post content out there, and I'm pushing my content out there and doing video. There was a famous car guy in Chicago. He owned like 12 dealerships around the city and, actually regional area, 3, 4 states. He just passed away. But for years and years, he was deemed as the crazy car guy on TV, always doing outrageous and outlandish things and putting that stuff out on TV, right? You watch it during the Cubs game or the White Sox game, you'd always know that one of his car ads would be out there. And the funny thing is that event, those things he was doing back then is the same thing people are doing today with social media and pushing their content out there. It's interesting, that whole cycle, how that whole thing comes around. So it's the same thing with picking up the phone and prospecting. I just wanted to comment on John's $2,000 deal, right? So how many times have you worked with a buyer working with a lender who says, oh, for a quarter point, I'm going to go somewhere else to a different lender? For a quarter point, when you talk about a quarter point on a residential mortgage, you're probably talking $8 a month, right? It doesn't even make any sense from a servicing standpoint or production standpoint. So, John, I'm very sympathetic to that whole story. So
it's amazing because I think that's fantastic, just because, to Chris's point and, what Gary Vee says. And if you just put yourself out there, inevitably there are people that are just not going to do it. And they'll always pay or whatever it is. But there are, I get the listings all the time in my area, and there's owners that list their house and they always think it's worth more, and they have a picture and the picture's sideways and it's dark. And if you just went there, like you said, and just said, hey, listen, do it this way and you have a better shot, inevitably, by providing value, you get paid. And that's the bottom line. And that's sort of what I tried to explain. I said, listen, it's not about the $2,000. If I didn't bring the buyer, if I didn't have my network, forget the $2,000 that you wanted, you would have made $0,000 because it wouldn't have gone full circle. So, people don't give enough credit to value producing until they're in the situation where they see the value that they've provided to get something in return. Because when everyone's starting, when everyone's learning, everyone wants, they read an article and it's like, oh, I flipped a house in, 20 days and made $80,000. It's like, yeah, I know, but you've been analyzing deals for 2 years, and analysis by paralysis. Nobody talks about that part of the story. They only talk about the end of the story. And it's the beginning of the story and the hard work and what you do to get you in the position where you could sell 76 houses in a year or whatever it is. And it's just by listening and providing value. And then people don't realize the actual value component of getting a paycheck. If you provide value, you get value in return. If you don't provide anything, you're just a dime a dozen.
Right. Yeah.
So it was interesting to hear you talking about all the work that you did going through the classifieds and ads, and maybe it's a misunderstanding, or maybe I'm right just because of the age difference. Do you think it was much harder to generate those leads back then compared to today because of technology, or do you feel that it was just a different route of going about it?
I think it was easier. I really do. Listen, back then the newspaper was an inch thick. Today it's 3 pages.
Right.
That whole section of classified ads, you could look through there. Right now, you got to find stuff on the internet, and you might have 4 or 5 different ads for one house, and it's crazy. It's chaotic. Where back then, at least it was systematic. And you knew that, hey, listen, you could keep handwritten notes. And I knew that I called this guy, 14 times, and that's a bad number. My average touch on somebody was 7 to 9 times in order to list that house. And my philosophy always was, hey, I'm going to list them. I'm going to call them and follow up with them till they list or they die. And here's the deal, right? That, tenacity and going after the business is where the money's made. It's not made in the first call. And, as soon as somebody gets a little rejection, they typically go, oh, I don't want to do this, but if you got to fight through the rejection. But no, Chris, to answer your question, I think it's a valid question. I think it was easier back then. It was less chaotic.
So, and before you could,
Yeah.
that's the problem, right? I'm a pen and paper guy, right? I want a notebook and I want to say I've called this person 10 times, 4 times, whatever. And typically I'm in the 6 to 8 range to get something accomplished. So right in that 7 to 9 range. And that's just because it's a different, it's a little different. And that's the sweet spot, right? I say you reach out to someone 6 to 8 times, you're getting closer, right? You've either got a little bit closer or not. So right in that same wheelhouse. But back in the day, and I'm not, 10 years ago, right? Even when I was cold calling, when I was a financial advisor, it was pen and paper in your hand. Now there's so many platforms and programs and things that say they're going to expedite it that I think people can get a little overwhelmed when I just say, take out a piece of paper. Even tracking my calls at Marcus and Milich app, it's a piece of paper and it says like, it's blank to blank, but 8 to 9 a.m. and then 25 calls and then blank to blank. And there's 5 rows and just put it in there, right? Every call you make, a circle if you got a connection, a line if it was a disconnect, whatever, just a simple form of that, you'll know you're making progress to a deal, as opposed to now, there's automated systems and you could upload different things to different websites. And because there's so much complexity, it actually makes it a little bit harder and people don't dumb it down. And I think that's an important thing that people realize. And when anything they do, it's, I say keep it simple, stupid, like everyone else. And that, done is better than perfect. If you try and be perfect, the time it takes you to get perfect, I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. But the time it takes for you to think you're perfect, you could have accomplished so much by just doing it. And how often do I say, Chris hears all the time, done is better than perfect, right? I blasted out an email this morning for a deal. I put it together last night. I copy and pasted someone else's, but I tweaked it a little bit. But I had my wife read it and make sure I didn't spell anything wrong because I'm not the best at grammar. But I said, fuck it, whatever. Here you go, right? Get it out. And it's been an overwhelming response back. But done is better than perfect. And don't overcomplicate it because you're right. It was easier because there was less available for people. Now there's so much available, it complicates things.
Hey, John, you know what they say? They say if you take one thing, it's theft, but if you borrow a lot, it's research. So
you go.
Copy and paste all you want.
There you go. I love it.